This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library
enough. You can get the Truefire All Access Pass for as cheap as they ever do it, the $99 thing. So just jump and do that if you're looking for the best price you can get Truefire All Access for.
I was reading an article that Lee Anderton had been involved with. He was talking about essentially like running a guitar selling business, musical instrument selling business, and in the light of the guitar amp, keyboard and PMT in the UK going down, as well as backs went down for a bit, and then I think it's back on its feet because I'm getting emails from them again. But I wanted to talk about this thing which I don't think too many people have talked about, which I think is actually probably a bigger threat than we realise, because it involves some of the biggest brands in the guitar industry at all. And I kind of think this is an interesting one. So what we're really talking about here is that Gibson and Fender now sell direct to consumer. And I think this could be quite an interesting thing that develops in the next few years. So one of the huge changes that I'm kind of seeing, which is I think still happening, is that Gibson and Fender, if you go on their websites, this didn't used to be the case. And I definitely remember, like, as a kid, you'd go through like loads of sort of guitar websites as a kid. Like, I'd be on Ibanez all the time. You'd have to go onto the website and then you look, does anyone sell any of these near me? That's kind of how things used to work, right? Nowadays, Google is pretty good for just showing up, and it will just say, well, there's, whatever you're looking for, Gibson Les Paul Greenie for sale at Peach Guitars. Bang, there you go. But there's this other thing now which is happening. Essentially, you can just buy direct from the manufacturer themselves, because they've set up, I presume, sort of this system. And why does this make a difference? I think this could make a bigger difference than you realise, because, so, one of the things that JHS said in his video, correcting me on a bunch of my incorrect assumptions about the pedal industry, was that essentially, as you sell on the product to distribution, to go to a music shop, I think he was saying, like, depending on which music shops you sell them to, it might be like 60-70% of the actual RRP that you sell it for. Now, of course, across all sorts of different products, different companies and all that sort of stuff, that's going to change, right? But what we know, therefore, really, is that a Fender guitar or a Gibson guitar sold directly to the consumer is going to potentially be, you know, about 30 to 40% more of the share of the pie going directly to Fender or Gibson. Now, of course, it costs money to distribute guitars and all that sort of stuff, but equally it does for like a music shop, whether it's like Peach Guitars or Andertons or whoever. Like, the cost of actually shipping a guitar and distributing them and all of that sort of stuff just is what it is, right? It might even, I guess, be cheaper for Fender because they're a bigger company. So Fender are sending these things over anyway in shipping containers. You know, they probably have a warehouse somewhere in the UK where all of these things arrive, and then they go further on to like Peach or Andertons or come all the way down to Project Music. Like, that's a whole thing in and of itself, which I think would actually be quite interesting to see how that particular sausage is made. But you think about it, so if I buy a Gibson Greenie from Peach Guitars for £3,000, you know, 30% of that, maybe 40, maybe a bit more, is going to go towards Peach and like what they do, you know, paying their staff, all of that sort of stuff. Versus if I buy it directly from the Gibson site, then all of that money kind of goes to Gibson. So one of the things that's interesting to me is that, like, Peach at the moment have one up for 2,500, whereas Gibson have it up for 3,000. So quite why you'd buy it from Gibson directly, I'm not sure right now, but maybe this is something they're going to get more competitive with. Also, this was the same for Fender, where I could find like if I buy directly from Fender, the Fender American Vintage 1961 Strat, which is like $2,069. If I buy it from any shop in the UK, it's like $1,899. So at the moment, the incentives are kind of there that you would just go, right, well, I'll buy it from Peach, I'll buy it from Andertons, I'll buy it from Project Music, I'll buy it from somewhere in the UK. But at some point, seems to me that this is something that could actually get more competitive, where it's like, well, Fender and Gibson, because they've got the Gibson Garage, that's in the UK now, right? That's like a shop front for Gibson now, essentially. That they're going to be competing, essentially, with the actual retailers as well, right? And this could be, I think, the next big change, which is kind of going to be interesting. In the pedal industry, that's already happened a bit, so you can buy direct from some of these places. So like Chase Bliss are pretty much entirely direct to consumer now, and it's kind of just an interesting thing where I guess it might mean that it's simpler in some ways for the company, because you don't have to deal with all of this distributor dealer network and all of that sort of stuff. In many cases, so for instance, I've never seen a Chase Bliss pedal in a music shop, and I don't know if you guys have anyway. It seems to me like quite a lot of the pedal business in particular is like online anyway. You know, I've not seen JHS pedals in my local music shops. I've seen like a few Strymon pedals, a few like Nuex pedals, a few Boss pedals, but I don't think it's really normally the case that you have like a huge selection of pedals in a guitar shop anyway. So that's already one huge chunk of the pedal industry that is either going to like the massive retailers, so like you see some of this stuff in Andertons, but probably more in their warehouse than actually in the store itself. I've been to the Andertons store, it's not a huge place at all. So even in that case, it's like Andertons itself, if they're selling like boutique builder pedals and stuff like that, probably they're not on the shop floor anyway. So it's kind of, I think this is going to be one of those things that we might see changing. Like, what if Fender and Gibson start kind of discounting their stuff? What if they're doing some more creative like marketing? Because this is not really something that they even push at the moment. I don't know if any of you guys have ever bought directly from Fender or Gibson in this way, but it is something. So I saw like Gibson, if you bought a Kirk Hammett Les Paul Greenie, you get 2 free Maestro pedals with it. So it's definitely something I think that we should keep our eye on, because it's not just competition from like Amazon, which is one of the things that, or Tesco, that Lee talked about. And he was saying, like, I don't think that those companies are best suited for like selling a guitar to a consumer. But what if Fender and Gibson themselves, who are, you know, like the big names in the industry anyway, like a huge percentage of guitars, I think it's like as high as like 60% of the guitars that are sold have either Gibson or Fender on the headstock. It's kind of a bonkers thing to imagine. And especially with this Squier Debut, for example, like an entry-level guitar that you buy through Amazon, like that's kind of bypassed the dealer network altogether. I think this is potentially something that is going to keep changing things, and it's an interesting kind of thing to think about. Like, are these guitar stores going to be, and shops and all of that sort of stuff, going to have additional pressure where they're actually now competing not just with each other, but with Gibson and Fender themselves? And is that good or bad, or is it, I don't know. The direct consumer thing, I think, is just something that is going to keep, I presume, getting bigger and bigger. It's just an interesting thing to think about. I'll turn on this fan, it's too hot. Cheers for stopping by. Do let me know in the comments if you've ever bought directly from Fender or Gibson, and are there shops like this around the world, or is this like a specific UK and America thing? Or just go online and have a look at this, because I thought it's kind of like an interesting development. And if they start to market this more, then that's a way that they could increase their own margin, presumably, because per unit sold you're going to be making much more if you don't sell it through a dealer. You just go direct to consumer, I presume.